The Houston Rockets have one of the most interesting off seasons out of all of the teams across the NBA, as they have a major decision to really make with this revamped young core to really stick the course or to potentially invest and go in on a big off-season trade to really swing the fences and help them compete in this Western Conference. So in today's episode, we're going to be diving in and exploring the Houston Rockets off-season, diving in and exploring players that I think they could potentially trade, players I think they could potentially draft, or if they do trade their draft pick, who they could trade that draft pick for, while also looking at the possibility of their off-season plans as well. We'll be getting into all of this and more. If this is your first episode here on the channel, if you are a Rockets fan, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section if I did a good analysis of the Houston Rockets or if I did not in your honest idea. And if you are a fan of the series, make sure to go check out the other videos, as there are plenty of NBA offseason breakdowns that we've already looked at for teams that have been picking beforehand. Without further ado, we're going to dive in and we're going to get into today's video. So make sure to grab a snack and let's get into it. And like I mentioned in the introduction, we're going to be talking about the Houston Rockets. And compared to some of these other teams that we've talked about here, they've all been towards the bottom of their respective conferences. Well, the Rockets were not, as the Rockets finished 52-30 currently, or were second in the Western Conference. They did lose in the first round to the Golden State Warriors in a 7-game series, but did have a fun, exciting team that brought out a lot of fans in Houston and a lot of people to turn their eye on them. Personally, at the beginning of the season, if you check my videos on here talking about this team, I thought that they were going to be better than expected. I had them around a, I believe, 7 or 8 seed, but I did not think that they were going to be a number 2 seed in the Western Conference, and they really did shock the likes of many people with the development of said young players. But not only just that, but some of their rising stars as veterans as well, as we saw guys in Amen Thompson really take that leap for this team offensively, showcasing that he could be that focal point for this team going forward, alongside a guy in Alperen Sengun, who really materialized as a solid rebounder and, scorer for this Rockets team down the line. Jalen Green had some inefficiencies. Fred VanVleet had a pretty solid year as a leader, and Tari Eason and Jabari Smith got to kind of showcase their bright flashes once again with this Rockets team. But the Rockets, currently sitting at $194 million, are underneath the first apron, right underneath that first apron as of right now. And their big question this offseason does revolve around one player, and I think that will ultimately be tied into what this team decides to do for moves going into this season. Now, like I mentioned, this Rockets team, they were finished at the top. So how did they land such a high value pick? Well, they got it because the Phoenix Suns, that's right, were one of the worst teams in the NBA, finishing at 36-46. And this was actually their pick that the Rockets did land, and they got this via the Mikal Bridges trade when they swapped the Nets picks with the Suns picks to hopefully land a potential superstar in the future. But let's dive in and let's explore this Rockets team and what they should do this offseason. Then we'll get into the draft, looking at their lottery pick at pick 10, and ultimately decide what this team should do. So once again, the big question really revolves around this team is Fred VanVleet, as he has a $44 million team option that got pushed back their scheduled date to really either decline it or accept it. And I feel like this is going to be utilized potentially in a trade if the Rockets do seem fit. But if not, if the Rockets do want to keep Fred VanVleet, he could be once again a solid guard to play alongside Amen Thompson and this team as a steady veteran, and that's the role that he was brought in ultimately to do for Houston. I could also see the Rockets maybe not making a move with Fred VanVleet right away for one of these guys that we will talk about just in a little bit, and using that contract for this team, because maybe that contract doesn't really fit the needs of the teams that realistically are trading their superstar away, but a guy like Fred VanVleet could be maybe possibly used at the deadline. Once again, pretty solid scorer, shot creator, playmaker for this team, but if they want to give the reins to a guy in Reed Shepard, their third overall pick they selected last season, maybe it is time to cut the reins on Fred VanVleet, but I would not be shocked if he is still staying with this Rockets team next season. Another guy to really discuss and dive in on is also Jalen Green. Once again, I mentioned his inefficiencies within the playoffs and his really sporadic scoring data this season for the Rockets. We've seen Green kind of be this inconsistent scorer throughout the league. Some nights drops 25 on some really good efficient scoring, or 35 or even 40. And some nights can be 1 for 12 from the field and just be an absolute donut and just not be able to produce. that's where I think the Rockets kind of settle with Jalen Green here. Ultimately, if I were them, I'd be looking to move off of him. I know that they said that they're not looking to try to trade him, but I feel like out of all these guys in the Rockets system, he was the one that was drafted to be their franchise star, and he hasn't taken that leap. We've seen guys like Amen Thompson, Alperen Sengun kind of look a little bit better than him and look a little bit more consistent, and I feel like if you're the Rockets, those are the two fundamental building blocks you want to have within this team. Maybe keep a Dylan Brooks, maybe keep a guy like Fred VanVleet, but looking like a guy like Jalen Green, maybe potentially even a guy in Jabari Smith Jr. or Cam Whitmore, I feel like could be potential trade targets for this Rockets team if they do look to add one of those stars. And the two stars that really keep my eye on for this Rockets team are Kevin Durant and Giannis Antetokounmpo. Obviously, the two big superstars that names have been surfacing around the NBA trade market. The Rockets obviously linked to Kevin Durant for the ability for the Suns to trade back for that 10th overall pick, and they could do so in this Kevin Durant deal. They could also find out a way to get some contracts either in Jabari Smith, Cam Whitmore, Tari Eason, Dylan Brooks, Fred VanVleet, Jalen Green, plethora of those combined to equal Kevin Durant's value there, which gives the Rockets a little bit of leeway in adding Durant. Durant will also be a solid fit, could play alongside Alperen Sengun, some of these defensive wings that they do have in Tari Eason, Dylan Brooks, whichever one they are able to keep, Amen Thompson, and etc. And I do think that he does help them kind of in this push for the season, but doesn't necessarily give away everything like they would have to do for a Giannis Antetokounmpo trade. And I know that Jalen Green, potentially Alperen Sengun, would have to be involved in a deal to get out Giannis Antetokounmpo, and that might be a little bit too much for the Rockets to really throw in all their eggs in one basket to land, yes, a superstar player in Giannis Antetokounmpo, but then what young pieces or surrounding pieces do you realistically have around Giannis to keep him happy or to keep this team afloat? That's why I think a Durant trade is a little bit more plausible for this team, but I do think that if they do a Kevin Durant trade, they're going to want to send the Suns Jalen Green. The Suns aren't going to want Jalen Green. They'll have to do a 3-team trade to get that done, and I think that's what really ultimately complicates a deal between the Rockets and the Phoenix Suns. So that's why I say I wouldn't be shocked if guys like guys like Jalen Green or Fred VanVleet are still staying on this roster, and the Rockets ultimately do assess maybe at the trade deadline or maybe use their draft pick to make some minor moves around the edges to really put this team into that hump chasing against the Thunder in the Western Conference. So now that we talked about who they potentially could trade, let's dive in and let's look at the draft results in the draft lottery. Now, like I mentioned, the Rockets got the 10th overall pick courtesy of the Phoenix Suns. They did fall back one slot. They were originally supposed to land at pick 9, but landed at pick 10. Not the worst for the Phoenix Suns, as the odds were pretty high there. We were happy at least that the San Antonio and Dallas to jump in. It wasn't Houston with the Suns losing that pick themselves. But ultimately, with the Rockets here with this pick, I could see them kind of doing one or two moves. One is drafting a piece if they do trade for a Kevin Durant type player or a Giannis Antetokounmpo player because they still value that 10th overall pick, or maybe that 10th overall pick will have to be used in a trade. But ultimately, I could also see this team once again sticking the course, not doing that, and drafting a player as well. And even if they don't trade this 10th overall pick for Giannis or Kevin Durant, it could still be moved in a deal for maybe a guy like Cam Johnson or on the fringes or a Herb Jones or something like that. But ultimately, I don't think that that's what the Rockets will use the pick for, and I do see them maybe selecting someone at 10 if they do make a big-time move. So let's look at some guys that they could really draft to fill in some holes if they do select at 10. So I got 3 guys for the Rockets here, one of them being Derek Queen, plays that power forward center position if they do look to move off of a guy in Sengun or in Jabari Smith to land a Kevin Durant or Giannis Antetokounmpo. A guy like Derek Queen could really ultimately help fill that role playing alongside Sengun if they do keep him. He can be a little bit of an offensive scorer, can help out with the rebounding, and I think would be a solid fit for Houston. Another guy as well that has been rising in the draft class is Asa Newell from Georgia, and the wing I think could be a solid piece for this Rockets team to add. Once again, if they make a trade, they have the contracts in Jabari Smith, Cam Whitmore, Tari Eason, Dylan Brooks. They do have a plethora of wings, but if they do make a move and have to send out 1 or 2 wings, bringing in a rookie wing, one that has been rising on the draft boards, I think is also another key piece for the Rockets if they do lose that depth. Now, if they do keep that depth, I don't think a guy in Newell makes sense for them, but if they do make a trade, I think he does qualify for their standards. And that's kind of where I go with Noah as well. Noah Senge or Senju. I'm sorry, I don't really know how to pronounce his name. But once again, the French wing could be another suitable piece that the Rockets really do look forward to add if they don't feel confident that some of these wings are going to be staying here long term, or if they feel they have to package one of these wings in a deal to get some depth at that wing position. Because once again, the wing position is very valuable, and across the league in free agency, there's not a lot of great wings to really add if you do trade some of them to add a Kevin Durant or something like that. So drafting one in either Noah or Asa Newell, I think, would be kind of cool for the Rockets here as well. When also diving in and looking at the Rockets, I think another piece to kind of keep in mind that I didn't picture here is Kasper Jakunis from Illinois. If they don't feel confident in Reed Sheppard, maybe a team is interested in Reed Sheppard. Getting a guy like Kasper's might be able to fill that point guard role, or kind of maybe even replace that Fred VanVleet role, as that offensive playmaker and creator. But if they do feel confident in Reed Sheppard, which I do think they do feel confident in him, I think that's a little bit of an unnecessary pick. So ultimately, I think he's kind of my last guy for them, but I wouldn't be shocked if they looked at him either. And then diving into free agency, last part of this here. The Rockets, as we can see, have some free agents. Steven Adams, Jeff Green, Aaron Holiday, Deshaun Tate, Fred VanVleet, and Aaron Holiday on those team contracts. We'll have to see what they do with those team contracts. Deshaun Tate has kind of not really panned out for the Rockets. I expect him to go to free agency. Jeff Green maybe comes back on a vet minimum. But Steven Adams was very key for this Rockets team, specifically in the playoffs, playing alongside Alperen Sengun in those double big lineups. And as we've seen the NBA go to those double big lineups, I feel like Steven Adams, once again, has really found a home in Houston. If you don't remember, last offseason he was traded to the Rockets from the Grizzlies when he was out for the year. So he was able to rehab in Houston and kind of gel with the team for that first half of the season before he even got to play for this team. And he really did, I think, bring out what they needed as a low-value backup big who could also grab rebounds and be an interior defensive presence. And I think that he likes it in Houston, and I think Houston, once again, really likes the value that he brings at that. And I think they'll have a happy reunion bringing a guy in Steven Adams back on a great quality deal, and don't have to be searching out there for that backup center either in the draft or in free agency if they're able to lock up Steven Adams. And that's what I got for the Houston Rockets, ladies and gentlemen. Ultimately, I do think they can pivot. I think they can lean to potentially a Kevin Durant or Giannis Antetokounmpo trade, and I would see them kind of leaning more to a Kevin Durant trade over a Giannis Antetokounmpo trade, as it doesn't really essentially blow up their core as much as Houston does kind of want to stick to the path a little bit here from the reports. But if they don't go for a Kevin Durant trade, maybe a Cam Johnson, maybe a little bit of a Slayer move on the edges. But if not, keeping this kind of core intact, bringing a guy like Fred VanVleet, and once again, competing at the top of this Western Conference with guys like Amen Thompson, Jalen Green, Jabari Smith, and even Alperen Sengun getting better each season. We're only going to see the improvements within this roster. And then maybe they do have too many bodies. Maybe they do have too many good quality players, or guys that can fill in a role but can't take this team over the top. And at the trade deadline, halfway through the season, when a star is disgruntled, maybe that's when Houston makes a move if they're struggling in a Western Conference that is pretty deep and ultimately pulls the big time swing. But I don't necessarily know if that big time swing is happening before the season starts. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Once again, we're doing these videos with every single team, looking at their offseason breakdowns. So if you did enjoy this, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Hit the subscribe button and check out the other videos in the playlist as well, as there are plenty of teams that we've already looked at and broken down on this series as well. But once again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you guys are enjoying this series, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Have a great rest of your day, and peace out, everyone.